3,000 years, 30 dynasties. I mean, how do you even begin to wrap your head around a civilization that lasted that long? It feels impossible. But what if I told you there's a simple pattern hiding in all that complexity?
Okay, so take a look at this. This timeline maps out the whole epic story. You've got your big names, right? The Old Kingdom, the Middle, the New. But then you see these other things called intermediate periods. It's just a lot. It's a dizzying list of dynasties and pharaohs, and honestly, it can feel completely overwhelming.
But here's the secret. Hidden inside all that chaos is a surprisingly simple, repeating pattern. It's this constant rhythm. You have these incredible highs, these golden ages of unity and power, and then, boom, these devastating lows of chaos and total collapse. This is the secret pulse of ancient Egypt.
So to really get this pattern, we've got to go way back. I'm talking about back to the very beginning, before there was even a single pharaoh wearing a crown. We're going to a time when scattered villages along that life-giving Nile River started coming together to create something, well, something the world had never ever seen before.
Think of it like the recipe for a kingdom. This is what's known as the pre-dynastic period. You had all these different cultures popping up, each with its own unique pottery style. People were finally settling down, figuring out how to farm that amazing rich soil, and they started building the very first trade networks. These were the absolute essential building blocks for the empire that was about to be born.
And then it happened. The pivotal moment. Around 3100 BCE, this one ruler, we think his name was King Narmer, he comes along, conquers, and fuses the two separate lands of Upper and Lower Egypt into one. Just like that, he creates a single powerful kingdom, the very first dynasty. And there it is, our first great rise in the pattern.
And you know what happens when you get unity like that? You get unprecedented power and incredible ambition. This new era, it's going to be defined by some of the most iconic, mind-blowing structures ever built by humans. Yep, welcome to the age of the pyramid builders.
So this is the Old Kingdom, what we call Egypt's very first golden age. And seriously, think about it for a second. You just don't build the Great Pyramids of Giza. You can't. Without a massively powerful, centralized government, a super complex bureaucracy, and a whole society that literally sees its pharaoh as a living god. This was the absolute peak of stability and control.
But you know how it goes. What goes up must come down. This incredible stability, this unity, it just couldn't last forever. And so, just like that, Egypt experiences its first great collapse.
The pharaoh's central authority just crumbled. Power didn't disappear, it fractured, falling into the hands of all these ambitious local governors. This kicked off what we call the First Intermediate Period, a totally chaotic time of civil unrest and division. And that's our pattern's first great fall.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting and where the pattern really shows itself. Because Egypt's story isn't just about collapse, it's a story of the comeback. This is the fundamental rhythm of its entire history.
And guess what? Egypt does rise again. We get the Middle Kingdom, a time of complete reunification. Powerful pharaohs take back control, and you see this incredible flourishing of art and literature. They secure their borders, they expand their trade. I mean, the comeback is absolutely real.
So, this really shows us the two fundamental states of ancient Egypt. It's pretty simple when you break it down. On one hand, you have the kingdoms. That means strong central rule, stability, and of course, epic building projects. And on the other hand, you have the intermediate periods. Think fragmented power, internal chaos, and often foreign invasion. It's this constant pulse back and forth between order and chaos.
And just like our pattern predicts, after the peak of the Middle Kingdom, the valley returns. But this time, the collapse isn't just triggered from the inside. This time, it's caused by a powerful force from the outside, the Hyksos invasion.
So during what we call the Second Intermediate Period, these invaders from Western Asia, the Hyksos, they sweep in and seize control of northern Egypt. And they brought a game-changing piece of military tech with them, the horse-drawn chariot. Now, imagine you're in the Egyptian army fighting on foot. This would have been an absolutely profound and terrifying shock to the system.
But what happens when you poke the bear, when you humiliate a superpower? It doesn't just push back, it pushes back harder than ever before. After 100 years of foreign rule, the Egyptian pharaohs finally drive out the Hyksos. And get this, they adopt their military technology. And then they usher in the absolute greatest peak of Egyptian power ever, the New Kingdom, the Age of Empire.
Yeah, having learned that brutal lesson about what happens when you get invaded, the New Kingdom pharaohs go on the offensive. This is the Egypt you see in the movies, the Egypt of legend. You get rulers like Thutmose III and Ramesses the Great. These guys become warrior pharaohs, creating an empire that stretches farther than anyone could have imagined. And the stuff they built, the colossal temples of Karnak and Abu Simbel, they were projecting their power for all time. This was it, the absolute apex.
But we all know, no empire, no matter how powerful, lasts forever. After this incredible high, Egypt enters its final phase. Only this time, it's not a sudden, dramatic collapse. It's more like a long, slow sunset.
The cycle kicks in again, but this time it feels different. The third intermediate period sees Egypt fracture, just like before, as the central government gets weaker and weaker. But what's really happening is that the high priests of the god Amun, who are super wealthy, they start gaining immense political power. They basically create a rival power center to the pharaoh, and that leaves the whole country incredibly vulnerable.
And that kind of internal weakness, well, it's like an open invitation to outsiders. What follows is just a succession of foreign rulers. First, you get dynasties with Libyan origins. Then Nubian pharaohs from the south take over. Then the brutal Assyrian Empire invades. And finally, the mighty Persians conquer Egypt, which pretty much ends its native sovereignty for long periods of time.
But even then, the Egyptian spirit wasn't totally broken. There was this one last, brief, brilliant revival. It was during the 26th dynasty, sometimes called the Said period. Native pharaohs managed to restore stability, and they deliberately looked way back to the glories of the Old Kingdom for cultural inspiration. It was like one final, defiant flash of that old greatness.
But really, it was just a light against a gathering darkness. Dynasty 30, that would be the last ruling house of native Egyptians. After they were defeated by the Persians, and then came the conquest of Alexander the Great, well, that brought 3,000 years of pharaonic civilization to a final, definitive end.
So, when you look back at this whole incredible 3,000-year story, you have to ask, what's the real legacy? Maybe it isn't just the pyramids or the golden masks. Maybe it's that almost unbelievable resilience. I mean, this was a civilization that could completely collapse, just fall apart, only to rebuild itself time and time again. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What can its 3,000-year cycle of collapse and rebirth teach us about our